Let's start out with what's your main motivation for seeking a seat on the Board of Trustees at this time?
Main motivation for seeking a seat on the board is what I have observed as a grandparent mainly over the past few years in the district, and also what I have observed nationwide in school districts around the country. Some of the conflict and contention that has existed in places has been disturbing. I've been concerned with parents making sure that they have a voice in what takes place with their children's education. I've been concerned about some of the trends I've seen in other places. I would like to make sure, help to make sure that what's taught in our classrooms is appropriate for kids at various ages. I think the classroom is a place where we should be teaching math and science and English and history, and avoiding religion and cultural issues that can be very conflicting sometimes, and just focus on teaching young people what they need to know to be successful in the world.
If you're elected, how would you make sure you're considering the needs of all constituents?
That's a great question. I spent 10 years on the board before, and I think if you asked people about my service, they would say that I was a good board member and someone who was concerned about everybody. I love kids. I've got 7 of my own, and I've got 23 grandchildren, and I've got a great-grandson, and coached youth sports in this community for 20 years. And young people of all types and sizes, from every background, every gender and race. So I can't imagine myself not caring about everybody that's involved in the school system.
Great. What do you think the relationship between the board and parents should be like?
Well, first of all, the parents in this community, the voters in this community, elect a board. And the board hopefully becomes a spokesman, as a group, becomes a spokesman for the parents in this community. That's the principal way that individuals influence a board of trustees. I also believe that parents ought to be heard when they have concerns. And that takes place at our public board meetings. I do not believe in a free-for-all where community members come in and take over the board meeting. That's not appropriate either. And when I was board chair, when I was on the board the last time, we had a system that I think worked well. If people had comments to make, they got up and made their comments, and they had a time limit. There was no filibustering in front of the board, because the board is there to conduct board business. But I do believe that any member of the public, whether a parent or a non-parent, that has something that they want to say at a board meeting, it's appropriate for them to have an opportunity to do so. And hopefully in a respectful, dignified, appropriate way.
I think you probably answered the question with what you just said, but the way we ask the question is, what should the rules of engagement be at school board meetings? So you talked about a little bit of the free-for-all in certain circumstances over the last couple of years. How would you keep that from happening? How would you address it if it does happen? And what would those rules, what should those look like in your mind?
I want to add one thing to the last question too, Brian, if I could. The other way that I was engaged with parents and members of the community was when I was on the board is people knew they could call me. Nobody had to go through, any protocols to get to me. My phone was always available. The rules of engagement for me would be primarily what I indicated, and that is make sure people knew they have a voice and will listen, either at the public board meeting or if they want to give me a call. I'm happy to talk to them. There were times when I was on the board before when I would defer to an administrator because the question wasn't one that appropriately was one for me to answer. A board of trustees sets policy. We don't run the district on a day-to-day basis. And so sometimes it's appropriate to, refer those questions, but have a set of rules for how it's going to go. You have a time limit. When I go argue a case in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, I'm given a time limit. And there's a little red light on the podium. And when that light comes on, I'm done. If I'm in the middle of a sentence, too bad, my time is up. The other thing that we did before, and I think worked well, is if we knew a group was coming, we would say, you all are probably going to say about the same thing. So it would be a good idea if you would appoint maybe one or two of your group to be the spokesperson. And then we could even let that person or those two people speak a little longer because they're going to express your views. We know you all have the same view because you're here. So that's another way to have some control.
One little follow-up to that is the school board currently requires people to register in advance if they want to speak to the board. Do you think that's appropriate?
I wouldn't require that, frankly.
Yeah.
I just think it's a public meeting, and it's a board meeting in which the public is invited to attend. I'm not violently opposed to it, but I would tend the other way to say, if they come to the board meeting and they want to speak, we give them an opportunity to speak with a time limit.
Do you think K-12 schools are adequately funded? And if not, how would you recommend the legislature address the issue?
No, they are not, in my view. Well, let me back up. We have a very large budget in LCSD1, and we have a tremendous amount of resources. But I will tell you, my impression is that they're not adequately funding. I can't say for certain, because I haven't delved into it, I haven't studied it, I haven't looked at the numbers, so to say they're not, but it's just my impression. And that's based in part to some of the cuts that have been made. I was very disappointed when we eliminated elementary sports programs for kids. I have several grandkids who are very, very disappointed that went away. And I think it's a shame. I'm a big teacher fan, and I would hate to see anything that caused us to reduce what we pay to teachers. I think as a profession, generally they're underpaid. I'm a little bit biased on this because I have 3 school teachers in my family and a granddaughter I've got 3 children who are teachers, and I've got a granddaughter who's a teacher. And it's one of the most important callings anybody can have, I think. And I think generally they're not paid for what they do. So.
Yes.
As a board member, what would be your budget priorities for the district?
Ooh, great question. Priority number 1 for me in the budget would be to try to ensure that resources get to the classroom where the education takes place. When I was on the board before, I made it very clear that if it came to people versus things, I'm going to vote for people. So as an example, at one point when I was on the board, there was a proposal to give all the students iPads. Everybody gets an iPad. My response to that was, first of all, can we afford that? Is that a wise expenditure of money? But if it comes down to getting everybody an iPad or not giving the teachers a raise or something like that, I will move in the direction of people as opposed to things. I know we need things. I know we need technology and so forth. I'm not anti-technology, but I will tend to focus on people as opposed to things. When I was on the board the last time, I was very concerned about the size of central administration. The number of people employed in central administration and the cost of central administration, and I advocated for a reduction of the size of central administration. And we made some progress in that. We did have some positions that we were able to eliminate. We didn't cut people, but we did eliminate some positions. And it appears to me that administration has grown again, and it's become larger than maybe we need. Now, I don't know that for a fact. Again, I haven't dug down into the weeds, but if there are places where we can cut the administrative size of the district, then I would lean in that direction for sure.
You alluded to it already, but how do you feel about increasing teacher compensation? Have you looked at where Cheyenne teachers are in comparison to other districts or other areas? Are we in need of increased teacher salaries?
Only anecdotally. I haven't researched, compared Cheyenne. I know for most of the time I was on the board the last time, and even in the years since then, that Cheyenne has been a wonderful place for a teacher to be employed. I mean, our salaries here are much better than they are in Colorado and Utah. I know that for a fact. My granddaughter teaches in Rangeley, Colorado. And so I know that our salaries are better than some of the surrounding states. That's all I can say. So it's anecdotal at this point. But I want to make sure, I would want to make sure that we don't retreat, that we don't go downhill. My wife is very proud of the fact that her father-in-law was the head of the Wyoming Education Association for many, many years, Don Shaner. And one of the things he worked for very hard was to make sure our teachers had competitive salaries, and we've achieved that. And I think we're still there. But I just don't want to see us go backwards with what's taking place in the economy, with the energy industry and revenues and so forth. You talked about funding. I will do everything I can in my power to see that we don't go backwards with that. Whether or not we're up to par and need to increase, I don't know the answer to that right now.
So if we do need to increase, where would you find the funds to do that?
Well, there's only one place to find the funds, and that's in the state legislature to get the funds that we need. And I know there's an effort right now with attorneys challenging what's taking place to make sure we have adequate funding. But I learned an important lesson the last time I was on the board too, that we had a group of teachers, I think there were 30-some teachers that were promised pay increases if they completed their master's program. It was an online program. These teachers all did that. They completed the training. And then when they completed the training, they were told there was no money to increase their wages. And we had a very blunt board meeting with administration because we told them, I told them, and I had enough votes to do it, you promised these people you would pay them if they did this program. I know you can find the money. I've been around long enough to know somehow you always find the money that you want. And they did. So, anyway, that's another anecdotal.
Thank you.
thing.
How much freedom should teachers have with regard to teaching the district's curriculum?
That's another great question. I think they need some academic freedom in teaching, but I am strongly opposed to them taking off on their own trail and getting away from the curriculum. I don't know that we have much of that in Cheyenne, frankly. I have heard, again, anecdotally, that we have had some of that with teachers kind of doing their own thing. And it has caused some parents to be concerned and upset, and from my perspective, rightfully so. When I sent my children to school in this district, I expected the teachers to teach them, to give them the fundamentals: math, science, English, literature, history, and electives, you know, at some point when they get into high school. Grammar, you know, all those kinds of basics. I did not expect them to show a Hollywood movie as part of the English curriculum that was filled with inappropriate language or images or anything like that. What parents do with their children on their own time in their own home in terms of what they let them watch or read or do is entirely up to them. But I think there need to be standards and principles in the school district, and that's, from a teacher's perspective, it's largely the curriculum. But, you know, not every teacher's going to teach history exactly the same way, or literature. Not everyone's going to use Charles Dickens, you know, as the basis, although I think they should. But anyway, that would be my view.
How do you feel about the teaching of racial discrimination as part of U.S. history?
Well, racial discrimination is a part of U.S. history, unfortunately. It led to the bloodiest conflict in the history of this country, where over 600,000 of our fellow citizens were killed. So it's there. It existed after the Civil War. I know there are still elements of that exist. So as a part of teaching history, if you don't teach that, then you're not teaching history. I also do not believe that the United States is systemically racist. I do not believe this community is systemically racist. I was raised here. I went to school here. My kids have gone to school here. I was a basketball player at the University of Wyoming. My teammate and my roommate and my bedmate, because back then, when you went on a road trip, you slept with, they had 2 beds in each room, and you had 4 players in a room, and you slept in the bed with your teammate. And my teammate that I slept with was Marshall Gadlin, who was my friend and teammate. It didn't matter to me at all what race he was. He happened to be black. But when I hear comments, and have heard comments in the past, that perhaps Cheyenne is systemically racist, or I don't accept it. I just know too many of my friends, and I could list them. I mean, just too many of my friends are minorities, and I just have never observed that. Now, I know there are pockets. Believe me, I know racism exists. But to say that we're systemically racist, to me, is an insult to this community and to this school district.
Thank you.
So,
Do you support an opt-in or opt-out policy for kids checking out books from school libraries, and why?
I would generally favor well, let me back up. That's an interesting way to ask the question. What you're talking about are books that some parents believe have inappropriate content,
Correct.
Sexual content.
And the district currently has an opt-out policy.
Right,
So
and I've seen some of those books, because my daughter-in-law is very interested in this because she has children in junior high and in elementary. And frankly, I don't think those books have really any part to play in our school system. I can't imagine what it is. But having said that, if a teacher for some reason wants to utilize a book that has inappropriate content, in my view, I would be in favor of opting into that and not having to opt out of it. The opt-out policy, to me, puts pressure on young people and parents. They're not going to want to do that, some of them, because they don't want to be seen as weird or different, or that there's something wrong with them. So I would be more in favor of an opt-in, but beyond that, globally, I just think there are books that are inappropriate at certain ages. Now, as you get older, as you get into junior high and high school, then things become a little different. And I think there are courses that you can take in high school, electives, that the subject matter may be appropriate to that course, a current events course, or a course or something like that. But when we're talking about students in early grades, I just think there's some things that are just appropriate. They don't need that at that age.
Let me follow up and clarify, because part of what we're talking about, and a large bit of the controversy has been about school libraries. So should the books even be in the school libraries, and then should the parents be able to should it be incumbent upon the parents to give the librarians a list of, I don't want my student to check out these titles,
Yeah.
or should it be the other way around?
Again, I'm just going to answer this globally. I think there are some books that don't belong in school libraries, especially elementary libraries, junior high libraries. I don't know why some of these books are in those libraries. There's a public library, which has everything you can imagine. We have an amazing library in this community, and there are libraries online. If parents want their children to have access to those kinds of materials, they can get it whenever they want to. But again, I just think in our schools, materials ought to be appropriate to the age group. I'm so against trying to sexualize young children. I have seen in my life, in not just the work I do, but in the work I've done in my church for the past 18 years, I have seen so many lives destroyed because of pornography, addiction to pornography. It's one of the most horrible addictions there is. To me, it's worse than alcohol or drugs. I've seen families destroyed. I've seen individuals destroyed. I've seen suicides. So I'm just generally opposed to sexualizing young children. At some point, they're going to get it, okay? But I want it to be, I would like it to be at an appropriate age.
What should the process be for changing policies in the school district? And do you agree or disagree with the current policy?
The procedure for changing policies? Well, I may not know what the current procedure is when I was on there before, I was in total agreement with how policies were changed and how notices had to be given, public comment, various stages of the process under the Administrative Procedures Act of the state of Wyoming. So I had no problems with the procedure. I don't know that it's changed from when I was on the last time.
Tell us a little bit about your qualifications. Obviously, you've been on the board, but why now? Why coming back on the board?
Well, why now is I've seen what's happened around the country in some places that have cause me concern. I'm so grateful to live in Wyoming. I'm grateful to live in Cheyenne because a lot of the things that have troubled other communities haven't really troubled us. But I've seen some of that seeping in, and that caused me concern. So that's one thing. I would like to avoid that, and frankly, I would like to avoid some of the trends that I've seen around the country come to our school district. I will tell you right now that I'm not opposed to CRT, critical race theory. I don't believe it.
You are opposed to it?
I am opposed to teaching that formally teaching that. This goes back to the racism issue and whether the history of our country involves racism. It certainly does. So to some extent it's taught that way, but to bring it in as a full-blown theory that somehow marginalizes blacks as being victims and does the same to whites as being perpetrators or aggressors and those kinds of things. Again, I've never felt that in this community, and so that's something that I would like to see not come here, okay? I don't think it's here now, but I just would like to keep that because when I see things moving towards us, I worry. So that's something. I want to make sure that resources get to the classroom where education takes place. Again, I was very frustrated when I learned they did away with elementary sports programs. And I just thought, wow, why did you do that? Surely there was a way not to do that. So that's it. So that would be another thing. I want to make sure our schools are safe. That it's an environment where young people can flourish, where they can flourish in the classroom, where they can flourish on the athletic field, where they can flourish on the stage, where they can start to see some of their dreams, come true, and even have dreams. And frankly, again, I worry about things coming here. Thankfully, we haven't had a Uvalde. We haven't had some of these horrible, horrible tragedies. But nobody thought it would come to Uvalde, Texas, either. And, like I say, I have grandchildren attending school here right now, and I have children who teach in these schools. And I think we do a pretty good job. When I go to the school to get one of my grandkids to take them to lunch, it's pretty tight. So I'm grateful for that. But, I would want to make sure that continues. When I was on the board the last time, we talked a lot about bullying. I want to make sure that, we're good there. But lastly, I've had a number of people ask me to run again, and I considered it, really, really considered it, thought about it, because I spent 10 years doing this once before. But I know how the system works, and I love kids, and so I think I have something to offer.
Why did you choose to run for the at-large seat as opposed to the area-specific seat now that those exist?
You guys ask good questions. Well, the short answer is I've lived here my whole life, most of my life since the 5th grade. I lived on the east side of town for 18 years. Now I'm on the central side of town. I've had a pretty close association with the south side of town. Some of my church responsibilities have involved every part of this community. So I kind of have an affection or an affinity with Cheyenne, not just the Central Triad. I love East. I've got grandsons at East right now. I've got a son teaching at East. I love Central. I've got grandkids at Central. I love South because my son spent 4 years teaching and coaching there, so I love that community. That was the driving force. I just didn't see myself as Central Triad. And I know that, I know those board members aren't supposed to be, I'm representing Central, so I'm going to vote for Central. I know that's not how it works, but I just saw myself more as an at-large candidate.
Are you concerned about the change to the board at all? Because you've been on the board before when it's been all at-large.
Honestly, I actually think the change is great. I really do, especially for the South Triad. We have some amazing people in the South Triad, and I think maybe they were underrepresented, so to speak. So I'm glad that they're going to have a voice from that triad. Again, they're not supposed to be representing that, but their voice, their experience in life, their work with their kids, I just think it's a valuable piece of the puzzle.
Anything we didn't cover today that you really wanted to cover?
I was really glad the Buffalo Bills won last night. Josh Allen was amazing.
He is a great, what a story.
What a story.
He really is.
What a story. You know, watching him play at Wyoming, I always thought he was a good quarterback, but I never dreamed he'd be a superstar in the NFL.
Exactly.
No, you've asked great questions, some of which I kind of anticipated, but some of which I didn't. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.